Oh, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this live webinar. We're recording, so if you miss something, hopefully you can watch it again later on. I'm Rafa Lombardino, founding member, current vice president of ATISDA, and it's my pleasure to introduce you today to our speaker, with whom I had a great opportunity to present about audiovisual translation accessibility at a Linguist Education Online conference. It's been a little while, a couple of years, I guess. And I really admire her work, so I invited her to join us today so we can learn from her. Her name is Florencia Aguilar. She's an audiovisual translatress with over 12 years in the industry, specializing in queer translations. And she holds a degree from Gender, Politics, and Engagement from the Universidad Nacional de General Sarmiento, and graduated from the Gender and Diversity School at Mocha Chelis Brendan. I hope I said it correctly. Currently, Florencia is working towards her master's degree in gender and political studies at Universidad Nacional de 3 de Febrero. And she's currently writing a research paper titled Queering Translation in Search of an LGBTIQ Bilingual Glossary in Audiovisual Translation for Latin America. She's been working since 2015 for the US's most renowned streaming service company as a subtitle author and localization quality control tester. And in addition to that, she has presented at several national and international conferences on audiovisual translation and queer topics. As a lesbian, she's one of the 10 founders of the Feminist Translators and Interpreters Collective in Argentina, known as Stay Fem. And she's also a founding member of the Audiovisual Translation Accessibility Chapter of the Translators and Interpreters Association of Argentina, AATI. So now let's learn from Florencia, and feel free to add your questions to the chat. We'll be monitoring that. And if you want to turn on your mic, turn on your camera at the end and ask your questions yourself. Let's wait for the presentation to be wrapped up, and then you can jump right in for the Q&A session. All right, Florencia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rafa. Wow, that was quite an introduction. Actually, I want to say thank you to Rafa, of course, because she was the one who contacted me first, and Marco and everyone at ATISDA. I'm like so honored to be here. So thank you so very much. And thank you everyone for being interested in the topic. So should I start sharing my screen? Yes, okay. Can you see it correctly? Yes, okay. Perfect. Okay, so let's just start. When Rafa was introducing me, she mentioned that I am a lesbian, and that is something that I usually say whenever I introduce myself. As a matter of visibility, I want everyone to know that we are here, basically, and that there are translators or translations that are lesbians. However, I am not a woman. If you are not familiar with the theoretical part of it, basically is, I'm just gonna try to make it like super short and sweet and understandable. There was this French activist, a lesbian activist, who mentioned, whose mantra was, not all lesbians are women. And because of that, what she meant by that is that women have supposedly a specific role in society, which means in this society, in this heteronormative society, where the role of a woman is to be in the house and being a man's wife, basically. So being a lesbian, not a woman, implies not trying to fulfill those roles that had been, in a way, input by society itself. I myself believe, think of me as an activist, and I use she, her pronouns. And what I also added here is the hashtag that I usually use whenever I'm talking about queer translations. So if you feel like posting or taking screenshots or tweeting or putting something on Instagram, you can do so, and please use that hashtag, and that is my Instagram handle. I haven't actually posted a lot of new content lately, but there's a lot of the information that we're going to be talking about today. It's also on my Instagram page. The other thing is that I will be talking, and I mentioned this before to both Marco and Rafa, I will be talking about other identities that are not mine. And I'm going to do so with the utmost respect, because some of the things that I might think of specific terms or vocabulary itself might be what I believe is correct. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's correct for everyone or that it's used by everyone in the LGBTIQ+ community. So yeah, there's that. So I actually put up a little index of what we're talking today. First of all, I would like us to talk about the actual word or term queer and its timeline and how it has evolved, how its meaning has evolved throughout the years. Also about what lavender languages are, some of those examples, linguistic resources, and specific vocabulary or queer vocabulary. Okay, so first off, this is a book, it's in Spanish, and it's called From Queer to Queer, queer with a Q and queer with a C. These two authors, one of them is a transgender man from Spain, Paul Preciado, and Sajak Valencia, who is a Mexican lesbian. It actually goes over the entire history of the queer term and how it's been used in time, and how we get, us Latin American people get to use, some of us get to use queer with a C. So in this book, basically what it says is that the very first time that the word queer or the term queer was used as a derogative term for homosexual or for a homosexual man was in 1894 by the Marquis of Queensberry on this Oscar Wilde trials, because he was talking about Wilde and the relationships that he had with other men. But then it was like the very first record there is on paper, on dictionaries, was in 1914, that it was used both as an adjective and also as a noun. As an adjective also with a pejorative meaning, meaning from the outside and not from within. And this is something that we might talk or will mention also later, because it has to do with what I was saying also before. And also, it, as a noun, could also refer to a male homosexual or a female homosexual, even so. And this is from 1914. Later on, by the 1980s, you know, this was the time of the HIV/AIDS pandemics, and so a lot of gay men and also lesbians, to be honest, they actually became a very strong social group, trying to fight against homophobia. Homophobia is another term that we will discuss a little bit later. Homophobia and the lack of acceptability from the actual society. So they created this social group called Queer Nation, that it's actually like a subgroup from ACT UP, which ACT UP was this also social group that fought against basically the government's policies of not being interested in helping the gay community. So ACT UP is AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. And so the Queer Nation group actually wrote a manifesto, which is called Queers Writ This. And I have it right here. And I would like to read a little bit of that. You can find this online. I think it's also translated into Spanish. And there are two things that I'd like to read. To be honest, this manifesto is not very straight friendly, let's say. So it's more of a, you know, it's very, I could even say it's a little bit aggressive towards straight people, but we have to understand the time. It was the 1980s and the beginning of the 1990s. And when I mentioned before that the term queer was to refer to someone from the outside, is exactly what that means. That in this society that we live in, which is very heteronormative, meaning that the usual, in quotes, usual form of relationships is between heterosexual people, implies that some of us who don't really have those kinds of relationships but do not belong, basically, right? And it's called heteronormative because the norm is that you're either heterosexual or straight, or you're just not, and you're outside of the of society. So I'm going to read a few sentences that I thought are okay and not too aggressive. One of the subtitles reads, "An army of lovers cannot lose." And it says, "Being queer is not about a right to privacy. It is about the freedom to be public, to just be who we are. It means every day fighting oppression, homophobia, racism, misogyny, the bigotry of religious hypocrites, and our own self-hatred. We have carefully been taught to hate ourselves. Being queer means leading a different sort of life. It's about being on the margins, defining ourselves. We are an army because we have to be. We're an army because we're so powerful. We have so much to fight for. We're the most precious of endangered species. We must fight for ourselves. No one else is going to do it. And if in that process will bring greater freedom to the world at large, then great." And on this exact manifesto, there's two little paragraphs that I also want to read because it has to do with the actual term queer and how it is read or understood by some people within the community and the other part. So it says, "Why queer? Do we really have to use that word? It's trouble. Every gay person has his or her own take on it. For some, it means strange and eccentric and kind of mysterious. That's okay. We like that. But some gay girls and boys don't. They think they are more normal than strange. And for others, queer conjures up those awful memories of adolescent suffering. Queer, it's forcibly bittersweet and plain at best, weakening and painful at worst. Couldn't we just use gay instead? It's a much broader word, and isn't it synonymous with happy? When will you militants grow up and get over the novelty of being different?" I'm going to read the other part right now, but this last sentence, "when will you militants grow up?" It's something that we're going to see on a little video that I brought, a little example, that it also shows like the different take on the generational takes, let's just say, okay? The other part says, "Why queer? Well, yes, gay is great. It has its place. But when a lot of lesbians and gay men wake up in the morning, we feel angry and disgusted, not gay. So we've chosen to call ourselves queer. Using queer is the way of reminding us how we are perceived by the rest of the world. It's a way of telling ourselves we don't have to be witty and charming people who keep our lives discreet and marginalized in the straight world. We use queer as gay men loving lesbians and lesbians loving being queer. Queer, unlike gay, doesn't mean male. And when spoken to other gays and lesbians, it's a way of suggesting we close ranks and forget, temporarily, our individual differences because we face a more insidious common enemy. Yeah, queer can be a rough word, but it's also a sly and ironic weapon we can steal from the homophobes' hands and use against them." So the fact that we are reclaiming queer, and we've also been reclaiming other words and terms as well, is one of the linguistic resources that I'm going to mention later on as well. Like I said, if you're interested, you can find this manifesto online. Okay, and now on, so that we can actually discuss a little bit of what LGBTIQ plus lingo or vocabulary is, we need to know what the lavender languages are. So on the one hand, there is this, if you're interested in this subject, there's a conference that's called the Lavender and Linguistics Conference, Language and Linguistics Conference. I don't remember the name now. That it's usually held on every year, and they also have like a summer program of a couple of weeks where they actually work a lot of queer vocabulary and dialect even. So this conference is already like almost 25 years old or so. So imagine that there's been a lot that's been going on in the past 25 years when it comes to linguistics or language, lavender languages. And the reason why it's called lavender is because lavender has always, lavender, purple, violet, has always been a color or shades of color that have been related to the gay community or the queer community. Just a side note, I will be using most likely gay community as a, as an umbrella term, or queer community when I want to talk about LGBTIQ+, just in case. When it comes to color, it has to do with the fact that the very first record there is of the lavender color being related to gay people or lesbians. It's actually from the 14th century. There was this poetess, Sappho, from the Isle of Lesbos, and the type of poetry that she wrote was, or implied that she was attracted or that she had relationships with other women. So the way that she would lure them or let them know that she was attracted to them was by giving gifts like tiaras or like a bouquet of flowers, but these flowers had to be or were specifically lavender. The other thing that has to do with the color being also used by the gay community was in the 16th or 17th century, because homosexuality has been illegal and still is illegal in several countries, and so you couldn't be out. You couldn't tell the world who you were, basically, not who you were. I mean, who you love, because another side note, the Love is Love logo, it's just completely rainbow washing. It's not a matter of who we love. It's just a matter of who we are ourselves. So because we couldn't actually be out and present ourselves as who we were attracted to if we wanted to, we also had to use like specific codes to prove so. So that could be also like with a specific little lavender on our clothes or whatever. And as a matter of fact, there is also, or there was this also hanky code or handkerchief code that it was used a lot in the 1990s, mainly by gay men. And it had to do with different colors and the way that they used handkerchiefs, whether they placed those handkerchiefs on their clothes, meaning specific stuff. I do have some of that over here. Let me see if I can read some of it to you. Okay, let me just show you this picture. Can you see it? Okay, so basically the hanky code shows the different colors of the handkerchiefs. So if it's red, if it goes on the top, it has a meaning. And if it goes, if it goes on the left, it has a meaning. And if it goes on the right, it has another meaning. So if it's put on the left, someone is the top. And if it's put on the right, someone is the bottom. Well, those are two terms that I didn't actually put on the example, but I'm gonna just remind me later so I can just talk about this as well. And then, well, the color, like if it's green and it's on the left, then it's the daddy. And if it's on the right, it's an orphan boy. And these are all very specific gay vocabulary. So yes, it had to do with the fact that how do we present ourselves without actually outing ourselves, right? The other thing that was also related, that was also used, the lavender name, was during the Eisenhower presidency, there was this law that basically laid off around 5,000 federal employees because of their sexual orientation. So that area in time was called the Lavender Scare, because we all, I mean, basically that was homophobia, right? And discrimination. They fired all of these employees just because of their sexual orientation. But then this was in the 1950s, but then in the 1960s, it was almost 1970. And do you know what Stonewall was or is? Does anyone have any idea? Okay, I'm thinking a no and a yes. I'm just gonna go with a no and explain a little bit about that. So Stonewall was a bar in New York. It's actually the place where it is thought to be worldwide, the beginning of Pride. So on June 28th, there was a riot because all of us queers would go to specific places, and because it was illegal for us to be ourselves, the police would riot all the time. So there was the riot between the police and gay people, transgender people. And so after that specific day, a month later, as a way of reclaiming or as a way of empowerment, the people would use purple or lavender sashes and would wear lavender as a way of, basically showing our pride. And then, and then the other thing is that whenever we're talking about lavender languages, we're talking about specific gay and lesbian lingo. I'm only saying gay and lesbian right now because, to be honest, like the very first terms that were used to talk about homosexual people would be gay and lesbian, because there weren't it's not that they didn't exist, but there weren't actual words to name other identities as there is right now. And I also added this little flag, which is a sapphic flag. As you can see, it has like a little lavender flower. Sapphic, I'm not sure if you know what that means, but basically sapphic is an adjective that describes women who are attracted to other women. Or yeah, basically. That doesn't necessarily mean only lesbians. It could also mean bisexual, queer females and stuff. I mean, not stuff, we're not stuff, but you know what I mean. So I was saying, the very first record of it, it's called Polari. And this is a very updated way of transcribing it. It used to have other names. But there is this researcher, Paul Baker, who during the 1990s, he did this extensive research of what it was later called the lost language of gay men. And so he found out that this type of dialect or linguistic code that was from England in the 1600s, was also a way of being able to identify other gay men. This was specifically for gay men. A way to identify themselves and to not being arrested or, being insulted or bullied in society. And so it took several words from Italian, French, Yiddish, and also some kind of backslang, meaning that the words were used backwards for us to have some kind of meaning within the gay male community. And I also, and I have, this is it's a short film, but it's long, it's like 7 minutes long. So I'm just gonna play a little bit of it. this is an example of what polari was. You can find this on YouTube as well, if you feel like it and watching it later. It's called putting on a dish, which is something specific in polari. I'm just gonna play it a little bit. It's in British English and polari, which I'm not sure when is what, because my ear is just like that. But I'm just gonna play it for a little bit for you. So see how he's very hesitant to actually say anything. Like you had to be careful to who you were talking to.
It's all gobbledygook. Ending's naff too. Got 3 drags and a spit doll. You from round here then?
More or less.
Ireland's the place to be. Bone of bats, what size are your plates?
10, I think.
What about your luppers? They're size 10 too?
I'm just gonna pause it because basically it's just it was just a way of showing you how I mean, obviously there was some gator over there because you know who you could talk to, but then at the same time you had this code where you could see whether you were able to approach the other person, right? And so polari is like the very first example, let's say, of these lavender languages, but then we have also other examples from other countries. In Brazil, we have the pajuva, which is usually, these are all dialects, right? And these are all mainly used in the community. In Brazil, it's especially used by male gays, you know, by gays and travestis or travestis, which is a political identity specific from South America, specifically Brazil and Argentina, which is not transvestite at all. We can talk about that later. So once again, these are all dialects. These are words that we use and that basically it's mostly understood within the community. Not everyone really understands what we're talking about. I wanted to put an example of some travestis speaking in Pajuba, but I mean, they're like really funny, but it's not like you would understand actual Pajuba. I mean, and also Brazilian, Portuguese, I'm sorry, but there are examples online as well. Rafa, I mean, you should watch them because super funny. And so the exact same thing happens in other places. For instance, in South Africa, we have the Gael, which is also used in the gay community, and it's a mixture of words and terms between English and Afrikaans. Same thing in Turkey. We also have in the Philippines another example of other lavender languages. In Argentina, we had what we call carrinche, which is also specific for travestis. As a matter of fact, this was mostly used in the 1940s. Some of the words that were used at the very beginning have now been used like in a more mainstream way, as in there's this, for example, there's this specific word, it's chongo, which had a specific meaning in, let's say, in the travesti language or lingo, and now it has evolved and has other meanings as well. And so this is an example of what carrilche is. Fuma todas las libre basically means run because the police is coming. There was a way of also warning others of, you know, of the police coming to get them. The Ikra Farsi is used in India by the Muslim Ikras. Ikras are specifically in India, they are called a third gender. There's an actual law that protects a third gender. And because they call themselves third gender does not mean that other identities are also third genders. But there's also a documentary on YouTube. There are actually a few documentaries on YouTube about the Ikra community. And then the other one is in Polynesia, the Bahasa, which is something I don't know how to pronounce, but it also has to do with this dialect and the differences in grammar structures and how this is only used in the gay communities so that they can communicate themselves. You know, also another thing is that I remember this, that for instance, the carrilche in Argentina is no longer spoken because the only trava as a synonym of travesti, the only trava that knew it, she passed away a couple of years ago. And there isn't an actual dictionary or glossary of carrilche. There are only a few, you know, loose words here and there. And it also has changed a lot from the 1940s to what it is used today within the travesti community, right? And the other thing is that in one of her last interviews before she passed, she would say that even though she wanted to leave some kind of actual record of that vocabulary, that at the same time, if it became mainstream, then it wouldn't be as you know, as a movement itself. No, that thing happened actually with Polari. Polari was used in a radio program by two people in the 1970s. And so people actually started to understand what that was. And so the idea of being this specific, private, closed linguistic code was just lost because then everyone would understand it. So it wasn't as exclusive as it was before. And so I think that was what really happened with carrilche as well. Like they didn't want that to happen because they had this other example that did happen, you know, previously. Okay, so the linguistic resources that I mentioned are basically feminization of language, which is the video that we're going to watch right now. And then the other one is feminization of terms, which basically what that means is how we have reclaimed several terms, but not all of us have. So I'm just going to play this guy. She's just the best.
Basic gay vocabulary. In English, to be insulted. To be insulted. In basic gay, to get red. To get red. In English, to be in shock. To be in shock. In basic gay, to gag. To gag. In English, to expose. To expose. In basic gay, to air the building. To air the building. In English, girl. Girl. In basic gay, girl. Girl. Now, class, let's say it together as a sentence. Girl, don't you dare try to read me because I will gag you and air the building.
How's that for us to translate that? Actually, Dean also has another series of videos, which is English and Advanced Gay Vocabulary. So it's really informational and useful, to be honest. I don't know if I mentioned this before, I don't think so, but I worked for several seasons, translating several seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race and All Stars and all that world. And I realized how feminization of language is just so embedded in the gay culture. right? I had a few things that I wanted to read as well. Yes, here's an example of how it is this communication of language. So another example of Dean, she also mentions Dorothy, and in the gay community, if you're a friend of Dorothy, means that you're basically another gay. And so I'm taking this information from the Queen's English. It's actually a very interesting dictionary. It's called the Queen's, not the Queen's as the Queen, royal Queen, but us Queens, you know, we Queen. The Queen's English, the LGBTQIA plus dictionary of lingo and colloquial phrases. So if you're planning on working with this topic, I strongly recommend it because there's a lot of things that are actually spot on. So it says, friend of Dorothy, a dated expression used to inconspicuously identify other gay or queer person. The term friend of Dorothy gained contemporary usage as a reference to actress Judy Garland's role of Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Garland was adored by the gay community and remains a gay icon. And I can assure you, like, if you did not know this, you will find it online though, because I had to. I didn't have this research when I translated RuPaul's. But it actually, there are a lot of things that you wouldn't really know unless you're like really into this. So yeah, get it if you can. Okay, let's see what else.
Basic gay vocabulary.
Okay, so I wanted to explain the acronym that we all know. I specifically added other, well, actually, that's not that I added, but let's just say like the most known acronym used is LGBTIQ plus. But it depends on whomever is using it, if they want to add other letters as well. As you can see on the right side of the drawing or the image, I actually added MB as well, P and A, which I will be explaining, you know, on the following slides. These are all drawings that were made by a friend of mine. He is non-binary, and yes, he does use he, him pronouns, which is why it's in Spanish, but let's just say it's lesbian without the A at the very end. And this is a lesbian activist, an Argentinian lesbian activist. She's like 90 years old, and she's the best, to be honest. So basically, a lesbian person is a woman who's attracted to another woman, or as I was mentioning at the very beginning of the presentation, it could also mean a political identity. I think it's important for me to mention that sexuality and desire is fluid. Just because you are attracted to a specific gender right now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you won't or that you haven't been attracted to other genders as well. So it's not, we're not like structured in a way. Oh, wait, okay. Okay, for the gay, for the G or the gay word, I have another activist, Fernando Peña, also Argentinian, who passed away a few years back now. It also implies a man or a male who's sexually, romantically, or emotionally attracted to other men. And there are subgroups of gay men. This is really, I mean, the information that I will read you right now, it's more of probably subgroups that are in the US, not necessarily the ones that we could see in other places. Oh, I lost it. Okay, so it says, what's my gay type? And another thing is labeling is, I mean, it's something that we could use, but it's not something that we abide in a way. We might use labels for a specific time in our lives, depending on how we feel, but we try not to, to be confident in those labels for eternity in a way. Okay, so it says, what's my gay type? So many gay men use a specific set of animal identifiers based on body type and age to identify other gay men. It is sometimes referred to as the animal kingdom. These are playful labels based on stereotypes found within the gay male community. And when it comes to stereotypes, it's something that we might do quite often. We think and we assume other people's, etc. Because it's about everything that we assume. We just assume who they are, who they like, and that kind of stuff. And it's not something that's actually quite cool, to be honest. So the different gay types based on these stereotypes are bear, cub, otter, pup, wolf, bull, gym bunny or gym rat, a jog, a chop, a twink, and a twonk. Those are specific words that could be used or not. You may be able to find all of these specifics on dating apps. For instance, on Grindr, you have like a whole lot of options to mention, like, or to describe yourself as how do you look, and if you're like more of a bear or any other set in the animal kingdom, and who you might like or who you might be most attracted to. It's actually quite fun. And we also have other types of lesbians as well. We also have this lesbian spectrum of who we are and who we like. And this is actually quite longer. I myself consider myself as a butch, which is basically a butch but a femme at the same time. Yeah, I don't know why I just said that. Okay. I'm just gonna move on. Okay, so it's the lesbian spectrum. I'm just gonna read a few of these as well. So it says, as early as the 1940s, when women were first allowed to go out to bars without the company of men, lesbian women began to establish their own community, finding visibility and acceptance in speakeasies and dive bars. Some queer women preferred stereotypically feminine garb, while others dressed in starched shirts and trousers. Thus, the butch femme binary was born. Over time, the binary evolved into myriad identities along the butch femme spectrum. While some of the commonly used identifiers I'm going to read those to you, there are countless ways for queer women to express their identity. One of the stereotypes of lesbian women or lesbians is the flannel t-shirts or shirts. We use them a lot. Or the septum piercing, or sometimes the one over here, we kind of do that. Or this, our hair dyed, it happens a lot. So the different types of lesbians. So we have on the femme side, high femme, diva femme, lipstick lesbian, hard femme, soft low femme, chapstick lesbian, tomboy stem. With stem is a pun between stud and femme. And stud is a masculine lesbian that it's only used in the Latin and African American community, not all of the lesbians can be studs. Then it's butch, and then in the middle of butch and butch, we have boy with an I, soft butch, dyke, soft stud. I do have dyke to talk about later. Soft stud, butch stud, stone butch, and bull dyke, which is all very masculine lesbians. Very interesting, to be honest. There are, I don't know if you've watched the L Word, but there's, I forgot completely, but there is a specific chart of all of the characters and how they could identify all this lesbian spectrum. It's quite funny. Okay, so bisexual is probably the sexual orientation that's more erased. Actually, the bisexual community talks a lot about bi erasure because somehow it is misunderstood that bisexual people only dates two genders. Us, that we are, language professionals, we might take the prefix bi as two, but it was in the 1990s that the bisexual community released the Bisexual Manifesto. And so what they say in that manifesto, I have a screenshot on the next slide. What they say on the manifesto is that they're attracted, or they could be attracted to someone of their same gender or any other gender. And because even though if you haven't actually dated with a person of a different gender other than yours, that doesn't mean that you're not bisexual. And that happens a lot, even within the LGBTIQ+ community. And that honestly sucks, because there's a lot of people who don't feel queer enough because of the actual pressure they feel that's been put on them because of the community itself. Honestly, it just sucks. So here what the manifesto says. It's like, we're tired of being analyzed, defined, and represented by people other than ourselves, or worse yet, not considered at all. This by erasure that I was just telling you about. We are frustrated by the imposed isolation and invisibility that comes from being told or expected to choose either a homosexual or a heterosexual identity. It happens a lot that some bisexual women who date men are probably the most bullied in a way, because I don't know why, but a lot of people actually comment on how they are relating to other people, but it happens a lot. So it says, bisexuality is a whole fluid identity. Do not assume that bisexuality is binary or duogamous in nature, that we have two sides, or that we must be involved simultaneously with both gender to be fulfilled human beings. This was in the 1990s, right? So at the same time, whenever we're talking about both genders, or if we ever say the opposite gender, that's something that we should actually, kind of think about a little bit more, because if we're saying the opposite gender or both genders, we're basically stating that we believe that there are only two genders, right? So that's something that it's better if we just don't say that or use that whenever we're writing, translating, or interpreting, especially interpreting, because when you have to be like super fast to translate something on the spot, like those are like little things that actually could go a long way. Okay. So the trans with an asterisk, it's an umbrella term that includes transgender people, transsexuals, and travestis. There's the fact of using an asterisk actually comes from transgender activists, that they say that it includes a lot of other identities that doesn't really have like a specific term for them. I don't know if you know what trans means, but basically it differentiates from cis. So you can talk about cis or cisgender people and trans and transgender people. So a cisgender person is someone who, when they were born, they assigned a specific gender, and in time, as they grew up, they actually stayed on that same gender. I don't know if I'm being, yes, okay, cool. And a transgender person is someone who has been assigned a specific gender at birth, and in time realized that they are not that gender that they were imposed. Okay. And so the other thing that I wanted to mention here is that the term transsexual or transsexualism was actually a term coined by the medical society in a way. And they used it to say that someone was or had a disorder, a mental disorder, to be honest. as a whole thing. As a matter of fact, it was in 2018 that the World Health Organization said that they weren't going to mention transsexualism as a mental disorder, but, and they didn't actually got it better, but they did say it was more of difference in gender kind of way. And so we have to be really careful whenever we are translating or interpreting these terms, because for instance, transsexual was, it was the term used for people that had had some kind of medical procedure, whether they had taken hormones or they have had any kind of surgical procedure. But that is still something that doesn't quite sound right, to be honest. Let's just say that the most appropriate word nowadays would be transgender or transgender person, because you don't necessarily need to have any kind of procedure to call yourself a transgender person, unless there are specific people who actually call themselves transsexuals, and that's fine, honestly. We also have to be very careful on how people name themselves or introduce themselves, so as we do not, you know, basically just talk about them in the wrong way. I actually wrote this little note down here because, like I was saying before, some of the identities that have existed forever maybe did not have an actual term for them, but that doesn't mean that they were trans or transgender persons. And the examples that I have here are the Muxes, which is a community in Mexico, in Oaxaca, to be honest. And they are, they have, I mean, I've seen videos of them talking about themselves in the feminine form or in the masculine form. And basically they're just a gender that they were assigned males at birth, and they have taken on more womanly attitudes or activities, like I don't know, like a specific, like sewing, and you know, those activities that were historically assigned to women. The E-class are this third gender that I was mentioning you before in India. And then two-spirits, which is a gender that's specific to the Aborigines cultures or the native cultures. As a matter of fact, when I was looking at this, at these terms, I remember that all of these has been translated into a language that we can understand. I mean, we're talking about two-spirits here, but do we know what the actual term the communities are actually using, right? So it also has to do with, you know, how, I mean, the information that we take and from where we take it. Now, there's a specific, I can't remember the name right now, but there's a specific website that's about two-spirit people, and they talk about this a lot. And I think it's really interesting, to be honest. Okay, so intersex, this was a term that was accepted by 1940s, to be honest. The wrong term that was used to refer to intersex people back in the day, and we should not use it ever again at all. I'm just going to say it right now. It's hermaphrodite, but we don't use it, not anymore. The correct term is intersex. So basically, when you are born, you are assigned either three of these sexes in a way. So it's either male, female, or intersex. And a person that's intersex has, it mostly has to do with the genitals of that person. So it could either have some female organs and male organs at the same time. Whenever intersex people are born, it is the doctors that impose a specific gender on that person because of what they see. I mean, I know this sounds like a little bit violent, but it's the actual truth. Actually, the intersex community usually talks about mutilation because they have been imposed to be someone because of what the medical community sees whenever they're born. And sometimes even parents don't even know how to, quote, handle the situation. And so they just go with whatever the doctors tell them to, right? Mauro Cabral is an intersex activist from Argentina. He's the best, to be honest. He's actually put on a lot of visibility on the intersex community. He's also a transgender man. Okay, so non-binary, this is in Spanish, right? So non-binary or NB in English is actually, it could also be an umbrella term for any other identity that does not fall inside of the binary male or female. So we could also talk about, well, non-binaries, we could talk about gender fluids, we could talk about even gender queer, bigenders. So there's a lot of identities, like there's this whole spectrum of identities that whenever they're not talking about either male or female, they belong to the non-binary umbrella term that I'm just telling you about. Pansexual people this is a sexual orientation, and this is basically the attraction that people have towards other people independent of their gender. We could also talk about people being plurisexual. So it's not a matter of, you know, this, they just like other people, basically. It doesn't really matter what their gender is. A lot of people use indistinctively bisexual and pansexual. That honestly depends on how they want to be called in a way, or how do they feel. There is not really a difference between bisexual and pansexual, but it is true that it was after the 1990s and that bisexual manifesto that I read before, in a way, some of the people within the pansexual community confronted the bisexual community, stating that they were transphobic because they thought that the bisexual community wouldn't engage in relationships with other genders other than the opposite one, you know, that I mentioned before. An asexual person is someone who may or may not feel desire, sexual desire or of any kind, or maybe they just like, they don't feel at all. That doesn't mean that they might eventually sometime could feel any kind of sexual desire or not, but this is what the A stands for in the acronym. It does not stand for ally. If you ever read that anywhere, that is just wrong, because an ally is someone who's straight, usually cisgender, well, actually it's cisgender, and it's not part of the LGBTIQ+ community or acronym. If you ever get to see that online, that is just wrong. And probably the person who wrote that is a straight cisgender person. So it's not ally, the A, it's an asexual person. And then finally, we got the Q for queer, which is, as you can see, these are all the drawings from the previous people that we've seen on each of the letters. And basically what queer is, as you know, as a summary of what we've been talking about, is anyone that is not heterosexual or straight, and basically who falls out of this heteronormative society we live in. So we have lesbians, we have gays, we have pansexuals, bisexuals, because they're all people who are not straight and who feel like they have to have their own community because life or society is actually really cool to us. What is this? Oh, okay. Okay, so this is an example of, there's only one term that we can see on this video but I would like us to watch it and you tell me what do you think of that word. The context of this is like the entire opposite of what society is right now. So basically on this society, on this video, everyone is gay, everyone's a lesbian, and the outcasts are the straights, okay?
What do you want to play now? I don't know. Want to play house? How about Ashley and I be the mommies and you boys be our kids and have to do whatever we say? No fair. Well, that's what mommies do. Hey, how about we be the daddies and you do whatever we say? Yeah. No way. I got an idea. How about David and I play mommy and daddy? That's really weird. No, it'll be fun. That's really disgusting. What are you, some kind of breeder? No, I'm not. R2. Am not. R2. Am not. R2. Come on, David. We don't play with breeders. Telling everyone that you're a disgusting breeder.
I tried really hard just to be normal after.
So what do you think of the term that we just saw? Do you have any idea? It's pretty simple, but so basically, this is actually a pejorative and derogatory term to talk about straight people, because breeder, you know, it basically is that it's people who breed out of, well, people, you know, the word, but it's actually people who actually are able to have children, like, you know, naturally in a way. If we ever want to have children, we have to think of other ways or other procedures for us to actually do that. Okay, this is another one. This one has a lot of examples. I love using this video on my workshops, actually, because especially for audiovisual translation, because you cannot do it. It's really, really hard. There's a lot of information and there's a lot of terms that if you're not really like into it, it might be difficult.
Oh, that's a lot of people.
Don't worry, they don't bite.
Watch out.
Hey.
Hello.
This is Ian. Ian, this is my crew from the LGBTQIA Center.
Hey.
Hey, Ian.
Are you gonna introduce yourselves, or do I have to do it for you?
I'm Bethany. I'm a triracial cisgendered girl fag. I identify as pansexual and my pronoun is she.
Okay. Hi, Emerson. Gender fluid, hetero-romantic, demisexual mutt, and a redhead. My pronoun is Z.
Hey, I'm Rabbit, genderqueer, tax attorney. I identify as Jennifer Aniston. Just kidding. V then birth.
DX. Chinese Mexican agender intersex AFAB. My pronoun is they.
Okay. All right, is it okay if I ask a few questions?
Better than to assume you know the answers.
What is intersex?
When a person is born with what is typically perceived as both male and female sex organs.
AFAB?
Assigned female at birth. When your parents decide your gender without considering how you may identify in the future.
Okay, and what's the whole pronoun thing?
When we talk about DX, we say, ask them if they would like a coffee.
How was that? Okay, I can see those faces. Okay, we'll be discussing those terms later if you want to. Oops. What do we have here? Oh, so this is another video that I have. This one's interesting. This one is related to what I was saying before and about the different generations and how we use some words and how it can affect others.
What about Peru?
Oh my God.
Right?
We are going there next month.
Machu Picchu, Cusco, Lima.
Are you doing the, what's it called?
The Inca Trail.
Yes, and Sacred Valley.
That sounds amazing.
Can you believe this one has never been to Peru?
Isn't it crazy? The best thing about Machu Picchu
the Sherpas.
Oh my God, it's a beautiful, beautiful cows.
When you're on the trail, you just stare at those gorgeous legs. You will not fall off the cliff.
I thought the Sherpas carried you up the mountain.
Well, if that were an upgrade, this one would definitely take it.
Just be like, Pedro, Jorge, whatever. I need to be carried.
Wait. Remember last year when Ken and I were in Mexico City with Steve and Phil?
Oh, and their weird friend, what was his name?
I know who you're talking about.
He told us about this club down there, so we're out walking around this totally sketchy part of Mexico City. I mean, it's really late, and we finally think we found it.
You have to ring a doorbell.
Right. And we go in, and oh my God, it's full of trannies.
Through the rafters.
It's a tranny club, a Mexican tranny club.
Of course they let you in.
I don't think that we use that word.
Sorry?
Tranny. It's offensive, and using it to insult each other, that's really offensive, so.
Does anyone want more wine?
Yes. I'm sorry. I just don't really appreciate that we have to be policed.
At a fucking gay dinner party.
Thank you, exactly.
Is this a Bordeaux? Bunch of fags bullshitting around a table.
Probably doesn't like the word fag either.
Aren't we just talking about Machu Picchu? Why don't we come back to that just for a minute?
I mean, look, you can call yourself whatever you want, man, but I just think it's important we call other people what they want to be called. That's the least that we can do.
Babe, I think we get it.
Why don't we do dessert in the other room? Huh? Let's go.
Can I ask you something? Why is your generation obsessed with labels?
Obsessed.
Because what you call someone is important. It's about dignity. It's about visibility.
Okay.
I think we owe that to people. Especially when you're coming from a place of privilege.
So you look at me and you see what? A rich white man? Is that what you mean? Is that my privilege?
Yes, you are.
Guys, I don't think
Let me tell you something about dignity and visibility. How old are you?
I'm 28.
He's 28.
Okay. Any so-called privilege that we happen to enjoy at this moment was won. Okay? And by that I mean clawed, tooth and nail, from a society that didn't give two shits if we lived or died, and indeed did not care when all our friends started to die. When I was 28, I wasn't going to fucking dinner parties. I was going to funerals. 3 or 4 a week. All of us were.
I understand that. I do.
Oh, you
Yeah.
do? Really? Why? Because you saw angels in America? Fuck that. Fuck that. You have no idea. This world that you get to live in, with your safe spaces and your intersectionalities,
And gay marriage, fucking without condoms.
all of it, this entitlement you now have to dignity and visibility as a gay person. Do you even know where that came from? Do you know who built that world? Do you know the cost of that progress? No, of course not. Because it would be more than your generation could ever bear to comprehend. So if a bunch of old queens want to sit around a table and use the word tranny, I will not be told off by someone who wasn't fucking there.
Excuse me.
What about Peru?
Okay, and then there's this last one video that I wanted to watch.
Veronica? It's Vero. Oh, hi, Vero. I see you have checked the transgender option on our little questionnaire. Yeah. Well, welcome. I want you to know, I think that all people should use all bathrooms at all times, especially guys like you.
Thanks, but I'm not a dude. I'm non-binary. My pronouns are they, them.
Oh, they, them. Well, lucky me. I thought I was only seeing one patient today. Veronica?
Okay. If you have any questions of what we've seen on the videos, then please write them on the chat, and we're like 1 or 2 slides and we're over. So I wanted to bring these terms. So here's the thing. My goal is for us to really think what we're saying when we're saying, and even though sometimes the original might say something such as identifies as or prefer pronouns, I'm gonna let you know what or how I feel about those specific phrases. So on one of the videos, the one with the group of people and introducing themselves, one of the girls said, well, I'm sorry, not a girl. They said that they were non-binary. They said AFAB, as in assigned female at birth. I myself find this term a little bit controversial because it's not really, unless that person introduces themselves as AFAB or AMAB, which is assigned male at birth, it's not something that we should use, I believe, because it's not something that we really care. We don't really care what their sex is, right? We don't care what they have in a way, right? So I believe that that's a term that we should really not use it at all. And it happens the exact same thing with FTM or M2TF. Do you know what that is? That's female to male and male to female. So these are also outdated ways of talking about transgender people. And also because they're only talking about 2 genders as well, right? There's no mention of any other identities that are not male or female. So these are, like I said, these are terms that I don't think they're really necessary unless those people are actually introducing themselves using those terms. The other thing is that usually we see people talking about homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, etc. In Argentina, we no longer use homophobia or transphobia, biphobia, lesbophobia, because it's not that they're scared of us. It's not that we, cause any kind of fear. It's just that people usually hate us. So what we talk about is about hate. I'm not going to say crime, but it's hate actions in a way. So we usually talk about homo hate would be, or trans hate, bi hate. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because if you, whenever you're working, you can actually use the word hate instead of phobia. I think it will make much more sense because it's not that people are actually afraid of us, The other 2 phrases that I was mentioning, the first, identified as and prefer pronouns. When people say, I identify as, if we translate that into Spanish, it's not that we identify as anything, it's just that we are. I could say in English, I identify as a lesbian, which I don't, but let's just say that I would. In Spanish, I would say I am a lesbian. I don't identify as anything. And the other thing is that sometimes when people don't accept us, basically, they use specific words or phrases that we use on a daily basis, and they use it to actually bully us. So, so you identify as whatever, and it's usually something that has nothing to do with gender. Same thing with preferred pronouns. When people usually say the pronouns that they use, sometimes people translate as their preferred pronouns are, when it's not a matter of preference, it's just a matter of who we are. I use she, her pronouns. You may use any other pronoun, but it's not something that you prefer per se. It's just something that you use, that you feel comfortable in using. The other word is a travesti, which does not, if you see this word in Spanish, you should definitely just leave it as it is. Because like I said before, this is a political identity that is specific to South America. Do you know what that name is?
Is a name
so a
assigned at birth?
Exactly. Thank you, Gloria. So that is what we call the name that it was assigned at birth. A lot of times when people talk about a transgender person who uses a different name than the one assigned at birth, sometimes, usually the media, maybe because they don't know how to do it or just because they're mean, they would mention the dead name of that person. An example that comes to my mind is,
Bruce Jenner?
Yes, well, see, that's something that we wouldn't really do. We shouldn't be mentioning the dead name of the person. So we would be talking about Caitlyn Jenner directly. Thank you, Gloria. But yes, exactly. So that's what we would do, because during their transition, it doesn't matter if they have spent many years of their life as a specific gender and they come out of the trans class, that we would say, and use another name. I can't remember the name of this actor. He's actually on Tales of San Francisco. I actually love him, but I'll get to that name later. But so whenever we'll be talking about someone that we know has a dead name, we have to make sure that we're using the correct name and the name that they're using right now. Another thing is passing. I don't know if you know what passing is. This is something that some transgender people look for or are eager to pass as cisgender people, but that's not always the case. So we should be really careful whenever we are, you know, talking with someone or anything, or because sometimes people do not want to pass as anything. It's just always this matter of just being, you know. So they just are. If they feel like they have to go under medical procedures to look like that or this, then that's just fine. And if they don't, that's actually great as well. The other two terms that I'm not sure if this exists in English, so I just coined it. So in Argentina, we talk about this legal terms, which are transfemicidio and travesticidio. So basically, it's a homicide, but it's more specifically a hate crime against a trans woman or a travesti, right? So these are the words that we're using in Argentina. The other term that I have here is TERF or TERFs, which is trans exclusionary radical feminists. So there's this branch or this part of feminism that actually excludes transgender people. We don't like them. But for instance, that little video that we just saw about yo queens talking about a specific person, that would be something that's transphobic. So in, you know, in contemporary terms, that we would be calling them a TERF or TERFs. So these other three terms that I know and you know what they are, these are all terms that have been reclaimed by some people in the community, and that does not mean that everyone's okay with them, all three of them. I guess it really has to do with the fact of how these terms had been in a way, or how these terms have affected these people in the past, if they feel like reclaiming it. And it happens the exact same thing with queer. It's just that probably queer has been more widely accepted in the community than these other three. And once again, we wouldn't be using these terms in any way unless the person that uses them actually you know, introduces themselves as any of these three terms. So what I posted here is some resources that you could use whenever you feel like there's something that you don't know, or that you may want to, you know, get into it some more, the Queen's English Us is this dictionary that I just showed you. You can get it on, I bought it on Barnes and Noble. It's actually quite useful if you have no or zero clue about LGBTIQ plus lingo. So I strongly recommend that one. And these are organizations, NGOs that could definitely help you out with vocabulary and knowledge, as a whole thing. And I could definitely or send my PPT to ATISDA so you can have it. So you don't really need to write it down, no worries. Okay, so that's it. I'm done. I see a lot of comments over there. I'm like a little bit scared. So
yes, I was checking out the chat here. Yeah, we have some comments just pretty much just chiming in of what you were showing, which was great. I think the most immediate question here is for the TV shows that you were showing the little clips. So I identified the first one, Shameless, when the boy Ian goes to the table and everybody's introducing themselves. I really recommend it. I love that show. So it's one of the social aspects that they explore on that show, but it's really, really interesting with drug abuse, alcoholism, poverty, and one of them is gender. So I really recommend Shameless. But what is the other one? What is the other show with the table, the dinner party?
Oh, that's Tales of San Francisco. You can see it on Netflix, actually.
Perfect. Yes, I was really interested in that, and Gloria said that she wanted to see it too. So good recommendation. Perfect. I think the other question that we had here was Gloria was asking about one of the terms that you were showing. So if Gloria wants to ask, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to know, how do you say dead name in Spanish? Because I've been asking my friends who are from Mexico and other places, and they're like, we just said dead name.
So in Spanish, there isn't a specific translation, but in the community, we could either say, some people use necrónimo, which is not really, it's not, I mean, if you think about it, it's not really the exact meaning, because necrónimo is actually like a person who's passed, who's past name. So if you use necrónimo, basically what you will be saying is that that person lived or existed up until a specific time, and now it's just different. So some of the people within the community doesn't really use it. The other thing is, in Argentina per se, we do use a lot of English terms, so we could use dead name here. But the other one that we use is what you were saying before, nombre asignado al nacer. I know that that's way too long for subtitles, but probably that's like the most appropriate and correct term. And I'm trying to think of another one. I remember I was talking to a colleague of ours. Her name is Vego. I do actually have it somewhere, so I'm just going to find it because I know there's another term that I can remember right now, and I'm going to let you know in a minute.
Yeah, because I've been researching, and like necrónimo it's a good one because she's short, but the issue is it doesn't have the same feel as a dead name, you know?
Exactly. Any other questions in the meantime?
Not so far. If you would like to ask a question right now using your camera or your microphone, go ahead. Oh, I see one from Felipe here. So Felipe, do you want me to read it or would you like to ask directly?
Go ahead and read it.
Okay, so I'll read it here. So Felipe said, I share with you that I feel compelled to learn about all of this because my work administrators specifically expects us to be respectful of members of these letters and make all of them feel respected and treated with dignity. I agree with that, and this presentation was absolutely great. I learned a lot and will be checking out the org sites listed, and thank you, Florencia. So great, yes, and I share in Felipe's sentiment because as not part of the community, but an ally that knew that the A didn't stand for ally, I really like to learn a lot about it, and I have some contact with people that do work a lot with Portuguese, so I learn a lot from them. only some of the materials that I've done now with subtitling have been related to that, but it's just really great to watch different shows with subtitles on to see how they treat it and how sometimes they make mistakes. One mistake that I can remember is it was a stand-up show, and you can see that the person doing the subtitling really was not prepared to research a term and made a huge mistake. And it was, I think, one of the only times that I actually wrote to, it was on Netflix. I wrote to Netflix saying, can someone please correct it? Because I really felt upset as a translator and as someone that tries to learn about different terms. But the comedian doing the stand-up said, that's a travesty. And the person translated into Portuguese didn't even, take the time to see that travesty and travesti, transvestite, are completely different words. So, it was really upsetting that as a language person seeing that mistake in my native language, and also an assault of, a whole community that there was nothing to do with what the comedian, what the joke was about. A travesty is just something, upsetting. It's a bad event and has nothing to do with transvestites, with travestis. So yeah, it's really upsetting when us as professionals are not ready to research things and talk to people from different communities to actually do a good job as language people. So let me see here.
Sure.
Okay,
so
I don't
two
see
things.
more questions, but go ahead.
Okay, Gloria, one last thing. So I found Bego, this colleague of mine, of ours, she mentioned that we could use in nombre, as in non-name. I mean, I find it interesting.
Kind of reminds me of Voldemort. That should not be named.
Yeah, maybe. Which is actually what it is, right? Because we didn't really want to mention or say the previous name. We could also talk about a previous name. But then again, if we say previous name, we're implying that there was someone before. And people are just, I know I'm being super repetitive, but people just are. It doesn't matter whether they came out of the trans closet now or 10 years ago, right? It's how, I think it has to do with the context we're in, that society is actually way more prepared to embrace, people coming out of the trans or just coming out of the closet, So yeah, that's another one that I have. I was actually telling Rafa before, we had like a roundtable last year. This is in Spanish. If you all speak Spanish, it's for free. You can see it on my link tree. There's this roundtable that we did with Atrae, and Bego is there, and we talked about that name. Artemis Lopez is also there, and
very good.
I can't remember my other colleague's name. I'm the worst, but yeah, we were 4 or 5 over there, and it's live. It's on YouTube, so you can just watch it perfectly. And then what Rafa was saying, I think it's a matter of, because when you were reading my, when you're introducing me, you mentioned that I was doing this research, which I'm quite behind, to be honest. But here's the thing, whenever I'm thinking of Latin America as, as a glossary that we could all use, I understand that sometimes our clients prefer a word or a term that it's not the same everywhere. So I know that in Brazil we use she, and I know that in Argentina we talk about travestis, and also in Uruguay. But then at the same time, I'm not quite sure how these are used other places in Latin America. And actually, if we talk about travestis in Spain, for them, it's a pejorative term to talk about trans women. So it really depends on, who our client is, how open they are to suggestions. If we actually get to have other terms, new terms or neologisms that we can, create or something. So, I understand it has happened to me before, but then at the same time, it's like we can't really do a lot when when that happens. And once again, Transvestite is not the exact same thing as travesti or travesti. You know, transvestite is someone, I mean, I think that we could actually talk about cross-dressing, you know, when we're talking about transvestite, which is completely different to what a travesti is. Usually a travesti could either be a trans woman, or lately in Argentina, we've also been having trans men calling themselves travesti. So the female form would be trava, and the male form would be travo in Argentina, okay? And this is actually quite new. So there's, you know, these transgender men that I've seen using the word travo, they're actually quite young, you know, like in their 20s, 30s. So, you know, I think it also has to do, you know, how we are finding new ways to name ourselves, you know, so yeah, that.
Perfect. Yeah, and I like the fact that we can use a lot of entertainment that is trying to push forward the issues that we have to be aware of. And as language people, if we can watch it with the dubbed version or the subtitled version, it really helps us to learn and help use those words or those terms that are accepted by the community in our work as well. And I like to recommend the Discovery, Star Trek Discovery. They have a very good storyline. One of the characters, actor is actually non-binary. The name is Blue de Barrio, and identifies a non-binary actor, uses they and them. And the way that they use that narrative in the story itself, since it's Star Trek with different planets, different species, this character, Adira, has a boyfriend, and the boyfriend passes away, and it's from a species that the conscience can actually live inside her. So that's why she's a they or them, because she is, or they are himself and herself together in one being as a human with someone else's past and memories and everything inside. So that's really a nice, touching story to kind of try to explain why people would use they and them in that kind of context, right? And also a friend of mine that she did the dubbing translation for She-Ra, the cartoon, the He-Man sister from Masters of the Universe. So they had the cartoon, the animation on Netflix, and my friend Debbie Cornelio, she did the translation for the dubbing script. She also talked about, in Portuguese, one of her talks, about the obstacles in language, because we don't have something that would say they or them in Portuguese. We don't have a neutral pronoun. So how to create—
Yes, you do.
Well, that's the thing. It's not officially accepted, right? The grammar police doesn't accept it. So how she tapped into the community to actually use what is being used by people in the community and to make that mainstream through translation. So that was a very good talk. If you speak Portuguese, I can send you some links on how to get a hold of it.
Yes, I would really appreciate that. Yes, I would love that. Actually, so there are two, I'm going to find those links as well. I'm going to send them to you as well. So Portuguese, I mean, I know that it's not grammatically accepted, but I mean, who loves right? No one. I mean, not us, not Latin Americans. I mean, you know, colonizers, we don't want them. So why should we expect them to talk or to, you know, just write rules for us to talk about ourselves? I mean, we have, this is what I always say, like we have 23 different Spanish language academies, and we're only, you know, thinking that the biggest of them all is the one in Spain. Nuh-uh. We have our very own academies, and, you know, we can definitely think of ways of naming ourselves. In Spanish, we have ella and we have eli, if we want to. In Portuguese, we have elu, and we have also eli as well. So, I mean, no, let's just do what we have to do, because otherwise, if we think of, I remember like I told you, I did translate several seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race. You can go ahead and watch my subtitles. There are a lot of terms that it actually took me a while. I did like 3 seasons or so. It was probably one of the hardest shows I've ever worked on, because I had no idea. Like, I knew stuff in English. I never thought of them, you know, translating them into Spanish. So it was like the most challenging, you know, show or series that I had to do. But anywho, on one of the seasons, one of the queens during the workroom, you know, it's like the previous time before they actually do the walks, the runway, I mean, they introduced themselves as non-binary, and I had to actually write to Netflix and say like, hey, so this character is non-binary. I believe that the best way to talk about themselves is by using a neutral pronoun, which, even though it's not grammatically accepted in Spanish, is probably the most correct way today to name them. And they were like super okay with it. And I think it was probably the very first show that had the AJ on it. And then there were like several others, but you know, I think it's just a matter of us talking to our clients and explaining them, you know, whatever we have to, I guess. I believe.
Perfect. Yes, I think it summarizes the fact that we as translators, as language professionals, have to always research. If we research terminology that is very specific to a community, like Gloria is right here, medical interpreter and translator, if you have to research medical terminology for the medical community, it's the same thing for any other community, especially with the LGBTIQ plus community. So if there's no other questions, we can wrap it up, and the recording will be available to our members. And Gloria, would you like to say something?
Yes, just piggybacking on what you said, it's not also the researching. I think it's also the ethics of accepting projects we're able to do, you know? Like, for example, I'm not queer. I have friends who are. I feel comfortable with asking them questions. But the thing is, if it's something medical and that has to do with that, I know I'm more informed because I also research a lot, the average person who does this, but I would be more comfortable giving it to, for example, to you, that you live within the terms, you know, and when that's what problem when people that are not prepared to do an assignment says, I just need the money and goes for it. You know, it's also that ethical part, because we are doing a disservice to the people that are reading those subtitles, that are reading those documents, that are on the other end of interpreting. And that I think that's also important. And I love your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I agree. Yes, definitely. I agree. I also believe that, you know, as translators or interpreters, we always have like this colleague that we think of whenever we're, you know, working on a specific assignment or task. So I think it's a good way for us, you know, those things that we used to do, like we would exchange cards. Now we have Twitter and stuff, or LinkedIn. So I think it's a good way for us to have like, you know, specific or several colleagues that we know that who we could talk to or ask questions about, you know, things that we don't really know. I mean, yeah. I think it's very necessary, to be honest.
Actually, I apologize for the long message in the chat. I wanted to thank Florencia for this wonderful information I just picked up. Summarizing my comment is that I supervise volunteer interpreters and translators in a nonprofit legal office. Many of our clients are escaping persecution from Latin America for their gender identity. And we have some attorneys, not all attorneys, will accept their declaration written, and some will want to go faster and then they want an interpreted declaration. I think I'm going to recommend to our legal director that we always take declarations written so that we can have the proper time for research on terms that they may use. Thank you so much, Florencia. That was a great insight that all of a sudden I realized it could be used to help our clients.
Well, thank you. Thank you, my pleasure. So I'm reading a comment from Gloria that butch was a direct term. I think it always has to do with, how we identify ourselves. It is very stereotypical to use either butch or femme, but it's also very lesbian like, it's very specific to the world, the lesbian world. I think it really depends on if they're presenting or introducing themselves as butch or not. Yeah, I don't think of me as using butch as a derogatory term at all, but I think it really depends on, yeah.
I'm sorry, I think it's kind of like when we say the N word, like I say the N word because I'm outside, but when you're inside, you can use it. So if you're part of a club.
Exactly. But seriously, it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. Like in Spanish, we would use puto, like all the time, or marica, like marica. I was mentioning about the feminization of words or terms. Like we would use a lot of feminines, whether with my male friends, which are either, or my ex, he's a trans man, and we use the feminine, tarada, ay que loca que estás. But it's very gay, it's very us, it's very, yes, some specific terms are, we can use them like freely whenever you are in the community. When you're outside, it's more of a, it depends on who you're actually, having a relationship or a bond from with someone from the community. But yes, it's the exact same thing. It's not that we want to be exclusive, but in a way, it kind of happens. Sorry.
Perfect. Yeah, it just summarizes that language is important. So we just have to continue to learn, and it evolves. New terms show up, new meanings for old terms show up. So yeah, that's very important. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I would like to wrap it up then, and just really, really thank you, Florencia, because I learned so much. I thought I already knew a lot about the subject, and there's always so much more to learn. And thanks everybody for being here. If you could just visit the links that Florencia shared with us. We're gonna have actually the recording, so you can actually watch it again if you want to, and invite everybody to just keep learning and keep in touch with Florencia. Follow her on Twitter. That's how I keep in touch with her too. And we can continue to learn together. All right.
Yes, or you can follow me on Instagram, because Twitter, it's very personal, and I don't really tweet in English, nor nothing very interesting, just pictures of my dog and my cat and that kind of thing. But yeah, sure.
Perfect.
And you have my email, and you can just contact me whenever you want. If you have any kind of doubt when it comes to terminology, and if I'm able to help you, or we can work together, or on researching together, then please do so. Like, I love this. So yes, sure. Let's just work together whenever we want to.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, and till next time.